And what we're going to see here is that one of the ways God brings about our humility is he judges our sin. Verse 28, it says, all this came upon King Nebuchadnezzar. At the end of 12 months, he was walking on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon. And the king answered and said, is not this great Babylon, which I have built by my mighty power as a royal residence and for the glory of my majesty? While the words were still in the king's mouth, there fell a voice from heaven. O King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is spoken. The kingdom has departed from you, and you shall be driven from among men, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. And you shall be made to eat grass like an ox, and 7 periods of time shall pass over you until you know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will. Immediately the word was fulfilled against Nebuchadnezzar. He was driven from among men and ate grass like an ox, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven until his hair grew as long as eagle's feathers, and his nails were like birds' claws. This is the descent of a man who was renowned. He so lost his mind that he began to live like an animal, not bathing, not taking care of himself, not grooming himself. His hair grew, he's crawling on the ground, no discretion. You know, one of the ways that animals are described as having no discretion of appetite. An animal will eat out of the trash can, whatever is there. An animal's only pursuit is its immediate physical pleasure. They don't reason like human beings. This is what separates. And Daniel's doing something profound that our generation needs to be reminded of, and that is humanity is not meant to behave like animals. That when we behave like animals, it's evidence that we are losing our minds. When our only pursuit is our pleasure and our gratification without discernment of outcome, when we will do anything that seems pleasurable to us, no matter how absurd, no matter how depraved, then what we are saying is that we have lost our minds as a generation. And as you look at the news and the headlines among us, we can come to only one conclusion, and that is we have lost our minds. And what causes us to lose our minds? Well, the same thing that caused Nebuchadnezzar to lose his mind. It was his pride. Did you notice his pride? He says that at the end of all of this, in verse number 30, he says that I have built by my mighty power as a royal residence and for the glory of my majesty. Again, this whole thought of man as man's God. He had forgotten that the best of men at their best are mere men. He had totally forgotten that. He had forgotten that it was God's grace that allowed him to succeed and prosper. And you know what the question of the text is, what it's echoing out to you and to me is, have you forgotten? Have you gotten to a place where you say, it was my mighty hand that built this life for me? That it was my hard work? Be careful when you go there. Be careful when your pride has gotten you to a place where you think that it's because of your own strength. How many know that I am what I am by the grace of God? How many have come to that conclusion? That if it were not for God's grace, I would not be here today. It's one thing to say that at your lowest point. It's an entirely different thing to say this at your highest point. As easy as it is for me to be critical of Nebuchadnezzar, I find sympathy for him because humility is not easy. Unless God humbles us, we will be in danger of the same pride of Nebuchadnezzar, who thought that he was both the genius of Babylon as well as the goal of Babylon. He thought he was the brains behind the operation, and he thought that it was because of him that all of this existed, and that at the end of it all was his own worship and gratification. Now, can you imagine the humility it must have took for him to write this? Again, he's writing it after the fact. So everybody knows that this king lost his mind. Everybody knows that he's been kind of off the radar for a long time. He now has been restored, which we're going to get to in just a moment. And he writes this letter and says, I want you to understand what happened to me. That what caused me to lose my mind was my own pride and rejection to God. Now, I won't make that as a blanket statement for all mental health issues, that it's all at its root a source of pride, but I will tell you that so much of what's going on in our culture, at the root of it is pride. And let me just tell you that it was an act of God's mercy that Nebuchadnezzar got judged. And I will say to you, as I've said to myself so often, though judgment is a painful thing when the Lord sends it, how many have come to look at the times where God has sent his judgment in your life as an act of his mercy? How many have come to that place? One of the things that God does in his mercy to prevent us from greater harm is to judge us now.